Okay, time has come now to look at the middle layer of the research onion. So what lies in the middle? It's the time horizon, the choice of methods, so mono method, mixed method, multi-method, and most importantly, the research strategy, which we will discuss to some length next. So these are your middle layers. Now, in terms of research choices, we spoke about research methods, and what you need to understand is that there is a fundamental difference between using one method or many methods. You won't get better marks if you use more methods than one. So, really, your choice should not be determined by the idea that quantity should surpass quality, if you know what I mean. So basically, your choice of whether or not you will employ a multi-method or a mono-method will depend entirely on your research aim and objectives and what you're trying to achieve. Definitely not assuming that more methods equals more marks. Now, the difference between multi-methods and mixed methods is whether or not you analyze qualitative data qualitatively, so with qualitative data analysis, and quantitative data with quantitative data analysis, or vice versa. In other words, look at an interview and counting instances, so analyzing it quantitatively. So that is the difference, but we will discuss this to more length under data analysis in the next block, so lecture 4. In terms of time horizon, so this layer here, whether your research is longitudinal or cross-sectional is really given by whether or not you're using a database. And if you are using a database, just look to see if the data is longitudinal or cross-sectional. Even if it is cross-sectional, for example, censuses are cross-sectional, even if it is cross-sectional, data may be available at different points in time, so you can create a longitudinal set. But I'm explaining this without actually explaining what does cross-sectional mean and what does longitudinal mean. Cross-sectional means you take a snapshot of reality at one point only. In other words, with interviews, you only ask respondents their views on a particular matter one time, not 10 times at different points in time. You're not interested to see how their view changes over time in cross-sectional research. If you wish to do a longitudinal research, then you would have to do that. You have to go back to them time and time again, asking the same questions, seeing if anything changed. Now, it is quite unusual to have longitudinal studies with interviews, so qualitative data, but it isn't impossible. So it's good for you to know both. Mind you, most master's dissertation research is cross-sectional in nature, so yours is very likely to be cross-sectional, but it may be longitudinal if you're using certain databases. So again, useful to know them both. Finally, the research strategy. Now, this is quite important because you have quite a few options there, and also because one particular option is very widely used by students, and I personally fully recommend it to you as well. So that's the case study one. Now, what is a case study? Quite simply, it is a study of one example of a particular type. Oxford University is one example of a university. Ryanair, one example of a budget airline. British Airways, one example of traditional standard type airline. Richard Branson, one example of entrepreneur, so on and so forth. Now, are these examples characteristic of their type? Is Oxford University characteristic of a British university or an ancient university? I think you would agree that it's not. Is Ryanair characteristic of a budget airline? I would also argue that it's not. So you need to be careful about generalizing from case studies. You shouldn't be doing that. So when you employ a case study strategy, say a case study of Dell Corporation, you don't aim to get findings about all companies that are similar to Dell. No, you're only limiting your findings to Dell. And if quite a few of you do research in a number of similar type of companies, then maybe one of you would like to look at a comparative study. But this is all hypothetical. You wouldn't be doing this. You will work all at the same time, and you will probably work on non-generalizable case studies. Again, non-generalizable does not mean less valuable than generalizable studies. So you don't need to worry about potentially getting a lower mark because you're doing a case study research. Case study research is really valuable in itself. Okay, so again, I'm reinforcing the idea that it's not less valuable than a large survey. It provides a rich understanding of a real life context. Okay, it uses multiple sources of data. So the case study itself is not a method of data collection or analysis. It is a strategy through which you collect data through a variety of ways. One of which could be interviews, another one could be simply a gathering of secondary data or documentary research. Or if you were to do primary data, which you're not, of course, you could distribute a questionnaire. So you could use any method you wish in a case study. The strategy is called the case study, not the data collection. So this is very important for you to remember. Now, a survey. Now, this one is very easy to confuse with survey, which in common speech we refer to when we mean questionnaires. But you have to remember, survey is a strategy, it's not a method. Okay? The researcher who adopts the survey approach can use a whole range of methods, not only questionnaires. However, questionnaires are most common. Why are they most common? Because a survey research strategy generates generalizable conclusions, and generalizable conclusions relies on a large sample. We normally can't afford doing interviews with a large sample, so questionnaires is the obvious choice in most cases, but it is important for you to understand that it's not the only option when you do a survey. To collect data through questionnaires, not the only option, but it is the most common. However, survey does not equal questionnaires. Questionnaires is a data collection method. Survey is a research strategy. Okay, they are popular in business research and perceived as authoritative. They are not without weaknesses, however. Sounders will offer plenty of explanation as to what the weaknesses are. Samples need to be representative, so random samples. But again, you don't need to only consider questionnaires. You could also consider structured observation or interviews. Again, more difficult for secondary data, so careful when you're considering surveys using secondary data. Now, there are two more strategies which you could employ using secondary data: archival research and historical research. I very much doubt that any of you would use them. I have never encountered a dissertation using either one of these methods, but they are at your disposal. The University of Glasgow archive has important sources and that you could use to do a historical or archival research in a management topic. So this is something you might wish to consider. And the archivists at the University of Glasgow Archive are very, very helpful in giving you ideas as to what you could do with the kind of data they hold. Okay, but what you need to remember is that this type of research, both historical and archival, is constrained by the nature of records and documents. In other words, you don't have full freedom in choosing your topic, which probably explains why very few, if any, of our students are enticed to go on that route. So you should probably have a chat with the archivist before you even choose your topic. I hope that makes sense. Right. And next we will speak about the outer layers to research methodology, research approach, deductive, inductive, and research philosophy.